I think for me, this is going to be one of the interesting conversations I've had on mental health, considering the fact that my guest, Carol, is actually an optometrist that focuses on mental health issues as they relate to Black men and academics, I would argue. Carol, am I correct in saying that?
Yes, you're correct.
I'm very interested. Why the shift from optometry to psychology, and why particularly mental health?
For me, it wasn't a shift, but more of expanding my horizon and the capabilities, because coming from a medical or a clinical background, when you identify yourself as a health professional, you are not only managing the disease, but you are managing a human being as a whole. And then mental health, it's one of the aspects that if you find yourself as a patient, regardless of the disease that you have, it has a significant impact on your mental health, depending on the clinical outcomes or the prognosis of your disease. So hence my interest in mental health, despite having been focusing it in such a wide scope of practice.
Now, I know that mental health is broad and people approach it from different angles. You are more focused on anxiety and depression, correct?
Yes.
How does one distinguish between the two? I always use these terms interchangeably. What's the difference?
Yeah, the line, it's a little bit gray there. Yes, hence most individuals we use them interchangeably, but more with depression, it's something that becomes regardless of it being chronic, it takes quite a lot of time, but it focuses more on it's emanate from other situation or circumstances that you find yourself in, and then it severely increased to an extent where it's no longer maybe just as stressful or an anxiety, but now becomes more of a depression. But whereas with anxiety, it might be less severe as compared to depression, depending on one individual to the other. But there are a lot of biological components or contributing factors that might either lead to depression or anxiety or even a combination of both.
No, okay. Have you been depressed before?
Not that I know of. I haven't been diagnosed of depression or anxiety. Although I do get anxious, but it's a normal fight and flight reaction of a human being. But it hasn't been that severe that it has to be medically controlled. No, I haven't been depressed. I might have been anxious, of which it's a normal fight and flight of human nature, but I haven't been finding myself in a situation where I'm very anxious or constantly anxious to an extent that my anxiety has to be medically controlled.
Okay. I was hoping that you would say, yes, you have been, because you've gotten ill before. And earlier you said falling ill. I'm not sure if I heard you correctly there. Falling ill does affect your mental health some form or another. Mm-hmm. But I have here two articles that one you've published and the other, I believe, is still a work in progress. In one of the two, you indicate that depression and anxiety are the most common mental health disorders, ranking among the top 45 in the hierarchy of fatal disorders. Why is this the case? Why are mental related illnesses?
They are a public health concern. The reason being, they don't come in isolation. they are usually associated with, like I've mentioned before, with other diseases that we usually focus on from the medical point of view. But they also related with social issues and then socio-political issues. So there's quite a range of contributing factors beyond just medical, but it goes beyond the medical field and involve other area of a human being that we often say they are social determinants, situations that you are not in control of, but at the end of the day, they influence your own health or how you do your things. Yes.
And I like the fact that you're bringing in those determinants, and I guess you're going to make examples of them now, because you also speak about the effect of depression on one's social life, their family life, and their occupational functioning. Do you want to unpack this for me, please?
If we look on, let's say, your social life, people that are depressed, mostly it might go either way. Hence it's actually difficult you might not figure it out quite easily, or even you as an individual, you might not be able to identify your own friend or a family member that they are depressed, because some socially they might still be that active person who wants to make sure that everyone is okay. They put their interest aside and only try to project it on others. And then you find this bubbly person, excited all the time, and then all those things. And then on the other side of the equation, you find someone who isolate themselves. They don't want to associate themselves with other people, and then it gets to a point where they feel like they are not welcome in the circles where they find themselves in. Yes. And then if you look into the work productivity, the influence goes to, if you have mental health illnesses or disorder, you tend to become counterproductive, because you might be absent from work, or you just show up in the workplaces, and then that's have a significant impact in any work environment that you find yourself in.
And I'm particularly interested on the work part, even though that's not going to be the main focus of our conversation. I actually want to go to men because the article speaks broadly about men. But what leads to occupational dysfunctionality as it relates to mental health illnesses? Can you give me examples? Because oftentimes you would hear people in the working force stating that they are going through certain things, hence their productivity has been lowered. And I ask this because I'm very much interested on organizational productivity. So what are those factors that would lead to an individual not being as productive as they should be within an organization?
I think they are quite broad. Like I said, it depends on the type of working environment that you find yourself in. I will give example. If you are a lecturer, and then you have outputs that you need to deliver, and then there's quite new technologies that come into your workplace. There is a transition into curriculum that you want to add to. And then there's also strains in terms of your workload, and then the expectations, it's high. And then those occupational strains, technological demands, they contribute to your increased anxiety, because you're always asking yourself, what could be the next? And then how should I tackle this? And then the culmination of those put a huge demand on your job in terms of the expectations. Then eventually it also affects your well-being as an individual.
Interesting. I must say, in your in one of the pieces that I read earlier, I saw that your LMSs, for instance, are one of the great contributors to mental illnesses or academic mental disorders, whatever you call them. And that for me was particularly interesting. And when I look back, I thought of a time when I was working at a particular institution not so long ago. And I was only functioning remotely, meaning that I was teaching online. Everything I was doing was online. And I can tell you now, half the time I was depressed. Or rather, let me use the term I'm used to, I was stressed. It was even hard for me to step out of bed on some days, you know? And when I then left and moved back to our institutions of higher learning here at the Nelson Mandela University, I realized what that had done to me, because when I have that face-to-face interaction with students, I sort of feel relieved. But then again, whenever I have to use our online sites, we have Moodle, Blackboard, all the LMSs. It's one of my greatest sources of anxiety, if I may be honest. So I think I would compare with you there. If I was one of your participants, I would have easily told you that, yes, indeed, it is so. But back to men. What's our story with depression? How do you deal with depression, and what's our attitude relating to depression and its treatment?
I would say we do have knowledge when coming to depression, and then we as men we are also welcoming of people that are already having mental health illnesses, or they might have been diagnosed with those kind of disorder. If I'm thinking of the South African context, it's in our nature of Ubuntu, kindness, and then being empathetic and putting ourselves in the shoes of others. However, we have issues with ourselves being identified as someone who is a mental health user or diagnosed with mental illnesses. Simply, it culminates from how we were raised. It's still a cultural stereotypes, and then there's still societal pressure, and there's still societal expectations among men. And then also it also put men in positions where they still believe that they have to conform to certain standards so that they can identify themselves as manly or masculinity, for the lack of a better word.
Does being depressed for men in some way emasculate
them? It's like I said, it goes from the stereotypes. You know, when you raise a boy child and you raise a girl child, when a girl fail, you will say, sorry, my girl, and then dust yourself, is it? But when a boy child fell, they will say, no, don't cry, you need to man up. That connotation on its own, it creates an impression that you shouldn't cry. And then you grow up with that sentiment that there is an expectation of I as a man not to express my feelings. But it goes beyond that men also are not willing to share their own feelings because they identify it as a weakness. Yes.
Okay. Is this true with all men, or only the rural men that you conducted your study on? Do you see it both?
I wouldn't say it's different, because when coming to mental health, when we compare studies from the global north and the global south, there is no difference in terms of mental health. the amount or the prevalences of mental health that we experience from the South African context in terms of the population dynamics and whatsoever, it's not different from different countries that they might be well off compared to South Africa. So the narrative that those that are in rural areas might identify differently, it might not surface, because I still believe that for the fact that we still find mental health affecting men in high economic countries the same way it affects low income countries, then it tells you that generally men still have certain stereotypes. And then if we look into broad research in terms of access to healthcare services and the utilization of overall healthcare services, you still find that more women are the ones that are using all those services as compared to the male. So it tells you that there are certain contributing factors or ideologies that goes into the background or in the thinking of a man in terms of their relationship with healthcare service providers.
I wonder what can be done to change the stigma. I'm not sure if we should even call it a stigma, or if it's just a fear of some sort. How do we change the perception of men when it comes to our attitude on mental health illnesses? Because I think, I think I've had a couple of conversations. I've had conversations with a couple of people, and they indicate that actually this is one of the most brutal killers, silent killers, depression, mental health, stress, anxiety, etc. So how do we then change perceptions? Because I feel like there's not much that's being done. Yes, I learned yesterday in one of the interviews that actually there is a free service that is offered. I'm not sure what this mental health organization is that offers free services. But again, we have such poorly advertised. I didn't know about it. And I know usually when we say things aren't popularized, or if they're there, and the assumption is that people should know them, it would be, God, how do I articulate this? Sorry, I'll stand a fish. So the perception is that when such programs exist, people out there would have access to them. But the reality is it's not everyone that has access to the internet, because I was pointed to their website when I was told about these guys. But I haven't seen anything on TV. A lot of us watch TV. I haven't seen anything on radio. I haven't heard anything on radio. I listen to radio every day. And if you check the billboards, there's also nothing if you drive on the road. So how do we then change our way of doing things so that we encourage men to change their attitudes towards dealing with mental health related issues?
I always say that mental health, it's a complex issue. Like I said, it involves quite a variety of issues, and then others we are not in control of. And then I think the first approach, it will be addressing the stigma and the discrimination, because stigma still remains a very significant barrier, with many individuals fearing discrimination or judgment if they seek help. So it starts with people not willing to look out for help because they have fears that they will be judged. And then we move to health infrastructure. We need to move to a point where we decentralize the services of mental health and reorientate those kind of healthcare services so that they can be accessible to to a large number of population without contributing so much cost. Because if you think of primary health care services where there's a lot of health professionals, I'm thinking of, professional nurses, I'm thinking of health centers and clinics. We don't have mental health care services there. That's where the problems lie. So it might cost so much for an individual to have access to those kind of services. And then I wouldn't say South Africa, in terms of government and institutional initiatives, they haven't done so much. They have done such a quite of work in terms of implementing the South African National Mental Health Policy Framework. It has been quite available. And then I would say different institutions, they are coming with different ways of implementing mental health care awareness and different program or expanding their counseling services. But it's that there. However, it's not enough because mental health, it's I always say it has layers that range from it's not only about an individual, but it also involves let's say it moved from an individual level to a family level, and then when you are at the family level, it goes to a community level, then it becomes a national issue, then a global issue. So it has to be tackled at different levels so that the impact can be very huge. But if you address it at an individual level, you're only changing the life of an individual. But if we think beyond what the individual can do, we should put measures to an extent where the impact can be at an individual, at a community level, and then at a national level. Then we could have known that we have exhausted all the options in terms of changing how we do things, as much as implementing the services is concerned. Because it's only when people know about the services, know what mental health is and its repercussions thereof, then they will be able to be willing to look for those services.
I wonder though, and in response to what you're saying, I wonder if the environment in which one finds themselves in directly correlates with their state of mental health, whether at a community level or at an individual level. If I may make an example, I was having a conversation yesterday with a scholar, again, from UKZN and UNISA, two scholars. And what came out of that was that, when you live in isolation, stress, depression in particular, attacks you in a different way than it would attack you if you were to be stationed somewhere with loved ones. How true is that?
Yes, that's very true. Because like how we relate with people have an impact in our own well-being. Because when we think about health, it's not only the mental state of being, it's not only the physical, but it also goes to a social. So your ability to socialize, your ability to be engaging with others, it improves your quality of life in a sense. But because if we think of people that are lonely, they are more isolated on its own, and then they are more likely to overthink, and then that contributes to some form of mental, not necessarily a mental disorder, however, a state of mind that might, over a long period of time, might lead into something. So there is a correlation in terms of your environment where you find yourself in, and also in terms of your social availability or the system that you have, it definitely determine the kind of mental stage you will find yourself in.
Okay. I guess one must try and make moves very fast then, because I live alone here, and chances are, if I stay alone by myself for a prolonged period, I might find myself experiencing some sort of mental deterioration.
No, but I choose to differ because I'm thinking we are open to a lot of social media platforms now. So we get to engage with our family and friends virtually, and then we get to interact in different forms or shapes. And then I think in that way it does contribute to social, because and you also don't identify or find yourself isolated, but you still feel like you're part of your own family, your own friends, even though you might not necessarily be with them all the time in face to face, but you have to interact with them by anyways.
It's interesting that you say that, you mentioned social media, and I'm looking for somebody actually who is going to join me and talk about the effects of social media on one's mental health. And I ask this because I've read a couple of articles that speak to this, indicating that ever since social media started hitting higher bars, we are seeing more people getting depressed, getting stressed, and all these terms that you guys use in psychology. And one of the things that are often common is that the standard is super high. If you look at what happens on Instagram, everybody is living this lavish life, and everybody is using that as a standard for their own lives. So it would be interesting to know if really social media is helping us to connect with our loved ones, or if it is making us lonelier than we've ever been.
Yeah, there is a relationship there. Like I said, the upcoming or the rise in social media, they do come with the advantages, but it also come with the disadvantages.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I want to go back to your article on rural men.
Yes.
And I want to know what do they associate depression with? Because how I understand depression and how you understand depression might not be the same. But it would be interesting to know how what they associate depression with.
Their association with depression, it's not different from the clinical terms that they will use, because I remember one participant was mentioning that crying over little things, and then not feeling not being part of others, and then they also mentioning that maybe you're not eating properly. Is it? Yeah, they will use different words, but when you try to phrase it and try to put it in a medical context, it still shows that there is an understanding of the level of the level or the significance of this condition that we would classify as depression. So, but the way they phrase it, it might be different. However, it shows that there is an understanding in terms of what are the contributing factors for someone to end up being depressed. Yes.
Okay, interesting. And you had 4 themes that emerged from that work, which I think is a beautiful piece of work, by the way. And I'm hoping that somebody out there, I'm not sure whether in social development or in the Department of Health, comes across your work so that they use it to frame whatever programs, intervention programs, geared towards helping men in particular on their mental health. So you had 4 themes that emerged there, and these were on the symptoms and the causes of depression. One of them was stress in relationships. What are they saying about stress in relationships? This is interesting for me. I think everybody loves to know. This is actually gossip.
Yeah. When coming to relationships, I think it was more broad in a sense that it was relationships with their partners, relationships with their family, relationship with their friends, and relationship with their counterparts, especially in different workplaces. Obviously, when I try to create a themes, I managed to say it's stress in relationships, but it was not solely based on relationship only with their intimate with their partners and whatsoever. However, relationship with their partners, it was coming more from more participants, because perceptions was that when they have the arguments, the disagreement, the way they see things, and then in a way it makes them stressful to an extent that way they feel they might be depressed. And then also there was a shift in between the themes, because it will move from a stressful in relationship influenced by unemployment, also going back to lack of family support, and quite quickly moving to financial problems. So, but they will be emerging constantly into within the stress in relationship, but it will quickly tap into the other themes when they try to narrate their own personal experience.
Yeah, because the second one that was indicated, or that is indicated, is it relates to financial problems. How bad is it for them? Does it lead to a point where one feels like, you know what, this is beyond me, let me just end my life? Or they are still able to deal with it? There are coping mechanisms for them.
Diagnosed with depression, they were more exploring what they believe might be the circumstances where people that they know they find themselves in. So when coming to the issue of financial problems, they think one might be depressed firstly if they are living beyond their means. Like you have mentioned how social media have an impact on us. So if that person doesn't have enough budget to sustain themselves, or to sustain whatever the lifestyle that they want or to portray, then they start to be more stressful. And then the other thing is when they are working, or maybe they are not working, they have a certain income that doesn't sustain the entire family. The family look up to them, so that if certain in the household they are not in good order, it's up to them to figure out something, and that put them under pressure to say that they should always find ways to make extra income, or to make sure that the household income sustain everyone or the family members and their next of kin, so that they can be able to live their normal life. So in that sense, they believe that that can actually contribute towards them being depressed, because they are not being able to maintain the financial expectations from their counterparts.
And this strongly speaks to provision as a male figure at home. Yes. Is this also still associated with the teachings that society plants on young men as they grow up?
Yes, it's still there. It's still there, for the fact that some participants they still feels like they are the head of the house. there is an expectations amongst them, and then there is a social expectations that they are providers, they should provide. I believe so. There are still men that identify themselves as they need to be provide, and then so they have to make sure that their financial means available to hit the families.
The second last bill speaks to unemployment. I don't think we even need to talk about this, knowing what is happening in South Africa. But also, I think it ties with the financial problems part because, theme rather, because if you look at what's happening inflation-wise, I think it just messes with one's psyche and every area of life. But what I'm more interested in is the fourth one, lack of family support. How important is that? And I think the question should actually be, how do we as men communicate how we are feeling to our loved ones? Because they can't assume that Scruffy is going through some form of mental health illness or depression.
I personally think we as men, we struggle to put how we feel across, mostly because we have a thinking that we should rise above occasions. And then there is also, like one participant mentioned that the social expectations that men don't cry. So you find yourself in a position where you are not able to show weakness to your other family members, because as the head of the house, they are looking up to you. And then it does not necessarily that if they understand how you feel, they will see you differently. But it's the ideology that if I express how I feel, then there will be a change in how they are being perceived as a man.
Yeah. Well, I hope something is going to be done because I think mental health as it relates to men has become a topical issue or an issue of concern lately. And it is just my wish that something is done about it, that we don't stop by talking about it in these platforms like these, or I'm not sure if our government is doing anything about it. I know you spoke about the framework, but what good is the framework if it's just there and there's nothing being done, you know?
Yeah.
So we appreciate people like yourself who go to the ground and speak to people. And I do hope, Uguti, there are going to be some follow-ups because I think this lays a foundation for greater things. Which would benefit men in rural spaces and I would say everywhere else in the country and maybe externally outside South Africa. I also have the article where you speak about mental health issues as they relate now to academics. And I think that's the space where you and I exist. And I want to start by a quote. Studies have shown a significant association between occupational stress and mental health. Would you mind unpacking this for me, please?
Come again with the quote?
The quote says, studies have shown a significant association between occupational stress and mental health. What have been the observations there?
There are studies that are actually telling us that the occupational stress in terms of the kind of work that you put in a way contribute to you being stressful. Because most of the time when we are in an academic space, we often put the needs of the students more than the needs of the academic staff. You, as an academic, you are expected to make sure that you provide graduates that they are the best you can think of, but what goes into you for you to be able to produce those graduates. So it means sleepless night. It means learning new languages that you have never used before, because there might be another device or a form of teaching that rock up, and then you have to learn. So those transitioning, they also come at the expenses of an academic. And then if those aspects, they are not taken into consideration, they constantly cause occupational stresses to an individuals, because then they are not coping with whatever that they constantly need to work on, so that they can meet the expectations of their job profile.
A friend of mine, he usually says that, academics are at high risk when it comes to mental health disorders, because of the many challenges that we encounter and the high demands that institutions of higher learning set for academics. For instance, you're expected to teach. There's a heavy load in many institutions of higher learning. You know that the ratio in terms of staff and students it just doesn't make sense in many institutions. That's number one. And then you are expected also to be active when it comes to research, and then it's community engagement and all these other things. Now, the question is, how do we then try and strike a balance as academics within the space, seeing that there's a whole range of things that we need to tick boxes for?
It's quite difficult to strike the balance, because I'm thinking, like we have mentioned, there is excessive workload that needs to be taken care of. We're thinking of understaffing. We're thinking of inflexible working hours. We're thinking of lack of control over the job design. Sometimes you don't actually have to dictate, and then you also have a physical working condition as well that it might limit you, and then you also have limited support in terms of colleague or the authoritarian supervisors. So there is a quite lot of things that you need to navigate through as an academic, for you to be able to get where you want to find yourself in. So striking balance, I think it starts with being aware when you are putting so much work that you are neglecting yourself. And then going beyond then, it's actually just taking a good care of ourselves.
I wonder what taking care of ourselves mean. Does it mean more sleep? Does it mean going to the gym and eating healthy? Is that going to help me deal with all the dirt in my head?
No, I think we as academic, we also have to advocate for good working environment. As much as students advocate for good academic environment for themselves, even ourselves, we have to advocate for good working environment, and then also try to do a lot of advocacy in terms of when we put so much work as academic in research, trying to do advocacy for the entire population, but we also have to change the way we do things, and also do a lot of advocacy for our own counterparts in academic institutions, to say what are the working conditions, and then what are the support system that we have as institution, and then what are the mechanisms or platforms or resources that we can use to harness our work, and then reduce the burden that we already find ourselves in. I think it should not be only taking care of ourselves in terms of physical activity, because that becomes more temporary, but we should be putting more measures that will be sustainable over a long period of time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go back to what you said. Institutions have become these facilities where everything is all about the student. We've become student-centric institutions. I also worry about that because it leaves the worker behind. It leaves the lecturer behind. And so I wonder, how do we deal with that? If the institution says that you are secondary and everything of our priority is given to the students, how do you then do things that benefit your health at the expense of the student? Or how do you avoid that cost?
That's a difficult one. Because I think we find ourselves in academic spaces out of passion, and then wanting to see students achieve, and then we know the impact that they will make out there. You sometimes even don't realize how much work you put in to make students succeed or to achieve their own goals. But you do it constantly without expecting anything in return. So it's quite an uncharted territory. I don't have a clear cut in terms of the best way to look out for yourself, and then looking out for the student, and then how do you navigate that to a point where you are satisfied with what you offer to the students. I think it's a complex issue that might involve a lot of thinking there.
Yeah. One of the things I realized is that it's not very easy to spot that moment where you've really had enough, where you're going through a lot mentally. It gets to a point where people commit suicide. Maybe if I may make an example, and I could be wrong, but it's my assumption. I need to actually pull out the story. In fact, I'm not going to mention the person's name, but there's an academic in one of the institutions of higher learning who was in the medical field as well, who committed suicide, I think about 2 or 3 years ago, because he was going through a lot of things. As I hear, it was mental related disorders or illnesses. And at what point then do you think academics should say, hey, you know what? I need to take a back seat. I need to step back a bit and only do 1, 2, and 3 and leave out the rest. Because there's also a lot that comes to our plates. I speak as an academic now, and not just as proofy. So at what point do we then say, I'm cutting now, I'm not engaging in more projects or whatever that comes?
I think the only time where you start seeing that you are neglecting all the other things that you used to enjoy, then that should be a red flag that you should throw and take a seat back.
Wow.
Yes. When you start, like if you are a person who prefer to go and play tennis, and then all of a sudden you don't find yourself having enough time to play tennis, then it shows you that you might be investing more in other things more than you should. So to safeguard yourself, you need to put a proactive measures that are more imperatives in order for you to keep yourself in a space where it's okay. because this includes fostering some form of the resilience, values, and finding fulfillment in other things beside the academia. So when you find yourself in those spaces where you are doing a lot of work or neglecting other things, then I think it should be a signal that you should take a sit back and take care of self.
It's interesting you'd say that. I've never actually looked at it that way, that if I no longer do those things that used to make me happy, then it means something is wrong. But then you are making me think to the point that my previous guest raised, when he said that, you know, the space requires us to be active, like really engaging. In order for us to get to our positions, for instance, you need to make sure that you are pushing those publications. You need to make sure that you are pushing when it comes to community engagement, when it comes to lecturing, teaching, and learning. You need to build a name for yourself. There's those things. So young scholars in particular, I think all professors don't care now. They know what works for them and what doesn't work for them, and they don't care. But mainly now speaking, because the academy is absorbing a lot of young blood, and it seems as if it's mainly the younger generation that experiences these things that we are talking about. So while it's stuck between, okay, let me go and play tennis after work, and let me work on this particular section in my research so that I complete the paper, so that I finish the manuscript by this time, so that it's out for publication. You know, I would assume it gets difficult to strike that balance if you think about such things. And for me, then, how much, let's stick to research. How much time should I then spend on research and the whole? If I say I want to publish 4 papers a year, but then they're taking much of my time, what must I do next?
No, like I said, we need to spend more time doing advocacy. We also need to advocate for our workloads and our working hours so that we can have enough time to do research. If we find ourselves doing a lot of teaching and learning over a period of 5 days, which means you'll only have 2 days, which is the weekend, but you are expected to work on something that is your work output. So we should advocate to say, if I have teaching and learning, it should at least be maybe over 3 days. Then I can at least have 2 days to fulfill other obligations that is expected of me to have research outputs. So, but if you are going to be in class from Monday to Friday, which means you're going to do your research on weekend where you should be spending time with friends and family.
And then you could be teaching maybe on Mondays and Wednesdays alone, not Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday through Friday. But then only to find that you've got a lot of modules and the content is this much. So you constantly have to immerse yourself reading, you have to immerse yourself preparing for lectures, on your approach for delivery, because each lesson is approached differently.
Yes.
So there's also that. How much time, if we are saying we are advocating, how much time should we then, in fact, how should we structure how our teaching and learning program should be? Should we teach every semester, every term, or should there be a period that is purely dedicated to research? I know some institutions say teach 2 modules this semester, and then next semester only focus on research.
That's quite interesting. But like I said, it ranges from one university to the other, and then it also depends how research driven they are as an institution. And then it also goes to the available policies that they are there. So like I said, if the university changed their culture of research and also change their culture of teaching and learning and also change their policies that are already there, then it's only where we can have a shift in a more flexible way so that those that have more interest in doing more research, they are given more time to do research. Because even if we find ourselves in the academic spaces, research might be an output for all of us, but the strength might not be the same.
Definitely. I was looking at this other university's minimum requirements to be professor back in the early 2000s. It was so nice back then. 2 associate professor, 2 master's degrees, 1 PhD, and at least 2 publications. Would you agree that the institutions of learning have high learning rather have set the bar so high such that we feel strangled in some way?
Yes, the bar has go high. I think it's us trying to be globally competitive as well. And then I think, yeah, and if we say we want to be globally competitive, then we will have to compete with everyone at the global level, because all of us, we want to be ranked the first. So if we are to be ranked at the first, then it will come with a lot of changes and then a lot of research output that will have to come out, and that put a high expectations on the academic as well, like you have mentioned. So things has changed in a sense that the bar has went up. Like now, the criteria it's totally different from professors that qualified over the past 10 years ago, like those ones that are qualifying recently. So the criteria is totally different.
Maybe as I'm about to conclude, you have individuals that spend almost all their time just working. From the time they were young, they're reading instead of them being out and playing with other children. They are doing things that should be considered productive. I'll pause here. Not sure if you're still with me.
Right.
So there's individuals that are generally hard workers. They find pleasure in working, constantly working, even when they were still young, at a young age. These would be people you find reading instead of watching television or playing with other children. They would be drawing, doing something with their hands. Such people, you met such people. And as they age, as they mature, they grow up with this culture of always wanting to do something, always being individuals that want to be excellent, to be great achievers. And so they would always be crunching those numbers. These are people you find working at 3 a.m. So you see, when we think about such people, it's more of an internal thing more than an organizational flaw, so to say. How do then such people, how do you think, I know you're not an expert when it comes to that, but I just want to pick your brain a bit. How do you think such people can deal with mental related illnesses? Because they experience them as well.
Mm-hmm. I think it's an uncharted territory overall, because we always know, like if your sleeping pattern get interrupted, you constantly neglect other things, other aspects of your own life. In a way, it kind of give you, it might not give you a mental disorder, but it might be a personality disorder of some sense, because it changed the way you you relate with others because you prefer to spend more time doing other things that doesn't involve anyone else but only yourself. So you try to identify yourself differently, and then that might in a way not be something that it's expected. But like you said, I'm not an expert. I don't know to what extent that could be such an impact to their life overall.
Okay. No, Carol, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you joining me. It's truly been an interesting conversation. I've learned quite much, and I'm hoping that whoever listens is going to take some of the things that you've shared and sort of try and infuse them in their own program as well. And yeah, I know for me, if I think back to our conversation just now, I'm gonna start doing things that used to make me happy. And for the longest of times, I've been thinking of going back to ballroom dancing because I'm a ballroom dancer, or rather, I was a ballroom dancer for many years. But then when I joined academia fully, all that stopped. And other extracurricular activities, by the way. So I think this might just be the right time to revisit those and try and strike that work-life balance, you know.
Yeah. No, it will definitely get there. I always say the way we think of substance abuse, we always say when someone drink alcohol excessively to an extent that it affects their work, then alcohol is a problem. Then they might be having substance abuse. So I think as academia, we should take the same approach. The more we do more work to an extent that it doesn't allow us to do other things that we used to do, then we are workaholics.
I love that one. No, thank you so much. I truly appreciate this. And as one of my friends often says when he concludes his shows, it seems.
Thanks for having me.